So hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the OSH Pro webinar 2020. My name is Imran Abdallah, and I am your host for today. And today we have the pleasure, we are deeply pleased and very much honored to have the company of Caroline Andreassen, who works at the Norwegian Labour Inspectorate. So Caroline is here with us today to discuss the topic of psychosocial work environment factors in management of occupational safety and health. So I hope I'm not oversimplifying the topic, but if I'm not wrong, I believe that topic covers issues like mental well-being at the workplace and how it can affect people in their lives. Issues like work overload, work intensification, maybe complications in workplace due to relationships and issues like that. So I don't want to take any further time. I wish to straight away welcome Caroline. Caroline, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Thank you very much.
Okay, you can take over.
Just one thing before you start, Caroline. Imran forgot some things. We as usual, will take any questions we have at the end of the presentation. So you can please write your questions in the chat box, and we'll go through them when the presentation is over. And just to add one more thing about Caroline, Imran mentioned that she's from the Norwegian Labour Inspectorate. She works with psychosocial work environment, and she has a number of years experience in this work, previously from her previous work, and now as a senior inspector in the inspectorate. I've worked with Caroline, so I know what she's going to talk about and how good she is at this. So Caroline, now I'm letting you loose.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and good evening and good afternoon to those who are taking part in this webinar. Thank you so much to OSPRO for asking me to participate in this. I am happy to share whatever experience I've had as an employee, both in public sector and private sector, and now as a senior inspector in the working in the labor office here in Norway. I thought I should just introduce a bit about where can we find this act. In different parts of the world, working acts do mention psychosocial working environments. And it's important that we are acquainted with such sectors in the Working Act. For example, in Norway, it's in Section 4-3 of the Working Environmental Act. In South Africa, it's in the Employment and Labor Law Act. And then in Kenya, you have it in the Kenyan OSH Act of 2007. So today we'll go through a bit of the psychosocial working environmental factors and how we can then deal with such factors when they arise, and how we can together create a working environment that is ideal for both the employers and the employees. So I thought I should take a little trip down as to what we're going to talk about. If I look at one of the pictures that I have on online in this slide here, is that if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk with others. And I think this talks mainly and most importantly about teamwork. So how do we then walk forward and at the same time carry with us all those who need help and who also can improve our working environment? So we'll go through a few examples about different workplaces. We'll go through the Act itself, the OSH Act of 2007. What actions can we take, and the way forward as to when we have seen those actions, and the results and the benefits of actually putting this into focus in the workplace. I have taken down two examples that I thought everybody can relate to, and what their similarities and the common factors are. And here, as you can see, I have put down truck drivers and shop clerks. Mainly, truck drivers work alone. They work long hours seated, driving long distances. They have minimum contact with customers, apart from when they deliver goods and have to sign off for those goods. They have the backup is the head office or the office at which they are delivering the goods at. And when it comes to issues that arise along the way, the follow-up by the employer in some cases is delayed until they themselves take this issue up with their employer. Whereas with shop clerks, they work alone, they work long hours seated more often than not, and they have continuous contact with customers. When an issue arises when it comes to customers, the backup is very close. That means they can just take it up with management that is in the shop with them. Thus, it takes is a shorter distance for them to actually mention these issues to their employer, and it can also take up at once or a few hours after, depending, of course, according to the workload that is in the shop at that moment. So, what other issues can then arise is if, let's say, we put some factors into place here. For example, if we have an employee who is a truck driver who is also female, she can be exposed to different kinds of harassment because of her gender. If she is wearing a headscarf, she can be then also be exposed to certain issues because of what that headscarf represents. She can also be exposed to different types of harassment when it comes to, for example, her height, and maybe also her weight. And these issues can affect her socially. How does she then communicate with the employer about such issues when she experiences them? And it's quite interesting because sometimes we think of these issues as, oh, they're just part of our culture, but we carry that heavy burden with us when we leave the workplace. Thus, our psychosocial workplace issues we take them with us home, and they in fact sometimes also affect our family life. So it's important that whenever an employee comes up to the employer and states such issues, that we take note of it, because this is, can ensure that we can maybe change the norm first and foremost, and secondly, we can also work on improving the way both our sisters and our brothers experience a working life. Not to maybe name the least that our sisters and our brothers or our daughters maybe experience a different working life than we experience. And other factor could be also that with men, it could be he's sitting alone as a clerk, you are a man, you can take this. What does that mean really? Does that mean that if, as a male, you're not allowed to show emotion when you feel stressed or when you feel hurt at some point or another? So these norms we have to take a closer look at. Does this apply to us here? Does it apply to us as a human being, and how can we then change maybe the way we actually say things or the way we accept things? Can we do something about that? And more often than not, we maybe break it down, we give it big words like stress. We give it like you're emotionally incapable. But these things are part of, as a human, a part of us as a human being, but they also ensure that we share with others how we truly feel. So if we take this seriously in the workplace, we can actually move forward in strengthening the experiences and the joys of being at work. I prefer to call it joys because yes, stress is part of the workplace, but we can actually enjoy stress if it's correct amount of stress. So these two examples of shop clerk and truck drivers, maybe you can take a closer look as to their working conditions. How is it that we can improve their working condition? The other examples I was thinking of giving you is with regards to the Employment Act, Chapter 226 in the revised edition of the Kenyan Employment Act. And it talks about, for example, work hours. How can work hours be an issue when it comes to psychosocial challenges in the workplace? Of course, an employer can give you a certain number of hours that you have agreed upon in contract, but at the same time, they can reduce those number of hours for one reason or another. You as an employee can go home and worry about why does this reason, why does this come up? Why have I received less hours? And thus, when you go back to work, you carry with you this concern: have I done something wrong? Why is it that I have less hours? How can I ensure that I maybe keep up with the workload so that I can get the right number of hours and thus get the correct pay? The other one example that also I would like to mention is when it comes to the entitlement of leave days that is mentioned in the Employment Act. Can I, as an employee, without having to be worried about repercussions or have any concerns, ask for entitled leave days without having to worry about the fact that maybe when I come back, I will not have a job because maybe my boss has seen where I have been weak when it comes to the duties that I have been given to do? How do I then make sure that I have the job that I am satisfied with? A third example that I found also very interesting is in this Working Act is that it talked about the employee shall ensure the sufficient provision of proper medicine for the employees during illness and, if possible, medical attention during serious illness. If I, as an employee, can read this in the Employment Act of Kenya, of revised version 2012, how do I take this up with my employer? Will I feel comfortable enough to take it up with my employer? So these are just some of the examples that I thought I could mention, and I thought it might be a good way of introducing the Working Act, the Employment Act of Kenya, to this topic here. The other act that we are talking about here is also the Kenyan OSH Act of 2007, which states the following: research and related activities. The director shall conduct directly or in collaboration with other persons or bodies, research, experiments, demonstrations relating to occupational safety and health, including studies of psychosocial factors involved. and relating to innovative methods and techniques and approaches on dealing with occupational safety and health problems. What does this mean? It is stated here, but that means this is left to the employer and the employee to come up with solutions, to come up with ways of improving the working environment. So when I read this one, it gives me a whole number of opportunities to look at what the employees can give me and how I, as an employer, can move forward in ensuring that our working place is a good place to work in. The continuation of the Act states also, as underlined there, the welfare of persons at work. These slides will also be available to be taken a look at, so I would rather not read the whole slide itself, but I recommend that those who are listening in today take a look at it. I would like to also take a look at the last part of the Act where it says including protection against mental strain. What does that mean truly? In the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, it states that strain could also be excessive workloads, conflicting demands, and lack of role clarity, lack of involvement in making decisions that affect the worker, and lack of influence over the way the job is done. Poorly managed and organizational change and job insecurity, ineffective communication, lack of support from management and colleagues, psychological and sexual harassment, and third-party violence. I think for me, it's important that we not take these as one is better than the other, but more like which one of these are part of my working environment. So it could maybe at times be the conflicting demands. It could also be poorly managed organizational change. It could also be sexual harassment. So the list itself is not full. I think it applies. These are just examples, so we can add many, many other factors in this overview. Some of the other signs, it could be the mental health of the employees. So, for example, feeling anxiety, not having enough sleep, the meaning fatigue could drag out the day so much so that one can put themselves at risk of getting a lot of headaches. Migraines are often also associated with psychosocial issues, because staff can at times sit and just contemplate contemplate on the fact that I am going to meet this person who is constantly harassing me in the workplace. I am having challenges with my boss, or I'm having challenges with a coworker who does not give me the opportunity to actually express how I feel. How do I then move from that? So what can I do as an employer? With the factors that I have mentioned in the previous slides, what we can do is to make sure we conduct a risk assessment of the psychological working environment, use experiences that the workers and employees have talked about. One example could be, yesterday I had a terrible experience with a customer who was very threatening to me, all because the milk that was in the shelf was out of date. Because we do not know what the customer has experienced a few hours before and why they can be then so aggressive to the employees, it's important that we make sure that we have guidelines. So in order to do those guidelines, what do? We look at the positions that we have in the workplace and which ones are most at risk. Is gender a factor? Is age a factor? Is beliefs a factor? And if so, then we include those in the risk assessments of the psychosocial working environment. Is working late a factor? Is working alone a factor? What about if I work only nighttime? As a nurse in a hospital, some nurses sit alone for maybe 5 to 6 hours and don't have anybody else to communicate with except for the patients. Who is then their backup when it comes to threatening or situations where they themselves feel threatened and cannot perform their duties? So creating guidelines is important. It is sometimes called SOP, which is standard operating procedures. And this is used internationally in a lot of hotels, international companies. They will call those guidelines as SOPs. And it's usually easier to make them when it comes to when it comes to working on buildings, because something that is physical and tangible, it's easier to write down the guidelines. But when it comes to psychosocial working environment factors, we find that very often, more often than not, these are maybe the last things to be looked upon. Whereas I believe they should be the first to be looked upon, because if the employees are not happy at work, then how can they then perform secure work duties without hurting themselves? The other fact, after the guidelines, it's important to do follow-ups with the staff and the employees. Maybe evaluate and see whether or not what we had written 12 months ago is still relevant today. A good example would be right now in the situation that we're in with the COVID-19 affecting a lot of workplaces. Something that was written 12 months ago might not have included the fact that some employees would have to have reduced the number of hours because of the COVID-19, or that the number of hours in the workplace is reduced to reduce exposure to people who are affected by COVID-19. How do we then, add this to our risk assessment? Maybe we have to do it every 6 months instead, but this is the COVID-19 is not something that we all foresaw. However, that does not mean that maybe we can add it to our risk assessments, because we know that it might arise at a later stage. Maybe I think it's also important to mention that having employees involved in the risk assessment is very essential. We, as a line worker, we know where it hurts the most. And the skills and the experiences of the employees cannot be written down unless they themselves tell the story. So, what can I do as an employee? Does the regulation provide for psychosocial working environment requirements? Can I say something about that? What situations can I report? And how should I report them? And to whom? And what should employees and employers do to make sure that the information that is present in the employees' experiences is put forward. And how can we then move forward from that? And how can we make sure that our workplace is a good working place to be in? So having clear guidelines, step by step, in routines in a language that the staff understand. It's so essential that it is so. It does not have to be word for word, but at times it can also be pictures. At times it can also be written just simple words and that relate to the issues that are at hand. It's important to put time aside to train the staff on both how to report issues, on how to make sure that their co-workers also do not experience a difficult working environment. And I recommend highly that we use our African roots in this aspect, because storytelling has a way of ensuring that a point gets through, gets across. And we all know that sitting next to grandma or auntie or uncle or grandpa, or anybody for that matter, that tells a good story, that story sticks in the head. That's how many of our beliefs about how to do things at home or in a family come about. So ensuring using this storytelling method, role play, maybe having it once every year when you have a company meeting, or even in a company party when at the end of the year when the bonuses are being passed out. This could be one of the ways of getting the point across when it comes to ensuring that psychosocial working environment factors are part of our working environment. We can also ensure, as an employer, you can also ensure that you have the role of a safety delegate or a health and safety person, one that the employees can get in touch with to discuss the working environment or issues that are related to the workplace. And this is not to talk about, I heard that in Kenyan Act there is something like a committee, but maybe have somebody who you trust, that and who also the employees trust enough well enough to be able to share their problems without having to go to management directly, but somebody who they can go to can be a buffer between the employer and the employees, who can then maybe also teach the employees as to what to report about and how they should report about it, and maybe also how they can give examples that can help to improve the working environment. So what are the benefits of this, of putting psychosocial working environment ahead of other issues in the workplace? Well, the benefits of this are that the employees will feel more at home, and thus we end up having a stable workforce. Less time is used in training new recruits, reduction in sick leave, less time is used in training a replacement, productive workforce, more revenue for the company, a good reputation, and that gives you more customers, repeat business, and an increase in business. And last but not least, satisfied employees. When we put employees first, they are the smiling face of the company. And if they know that the backbone, meaning the management and their co-workers have their back in any situation, they are also able to give better service to the customers. So I will leave you again with this quote. If you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk with others. And an inspirational person for the continent that we have said it all. If you want the cooperation of humans around you, you must make them feel they are important, and do that by being genuine and humble. So thank you very much. That was the presentation I had.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for the nice, educative presentation about social work, psychological, psychosocial work environment. You see, even pronouncing it correct is a challenge. Psychosocial work environment. One thing with the psychosocial work environment is that it deals with people's emotion and people's understanding, and this is always a challenge. And when you put it in an African setting, it's even a bigger challenge, as you mentioned earlier, that men are not supposed to show their emotions. You have to be tough in the job. You know, you got a job, then you have to take whatever comes your way and be thankful that you have a job. So, but I'll look at the chat, and we can continue this discussion. But look at the chat. There are some things coming up, and there is a question. I don't know if this is a question you can answer in the Kenyan perspective or in any other perspective, because it's quite a general question. How much support do employees get through employees assistance program when they are going through difficult moments, especially during this pandemic period?
Unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question fully. Like you said, it's a general question. However, when I read the Employment Act, Chapter 226, the revised version of the Employment Act in Kenya, where it mentioned a bit about leave, I think that's the best way to move forward. From what I have printed out, it's on page 26 in the chapter 226. So there it states a bit about sick leave and full pay. So that would be where I would think the best place to go to if one is in need of more information.
Thank you for that addition. And Father Bayo saying, if we show care to employees, their performance will improve, and this will improve safety performance at work too. This is a comment, but if I could put a question to this: if the employer has done what is required of him by the regulation, and he has done the risk assessment, and he has provided the safety equipment where is needed. He has the safety committee which oversees the different activities. What more should we put in the word care? Isn't that enough? Hasn't the employer done enough? What is there anything else we can put under care of the employees to make them better, improve their performance?
There are several factors, I think, that we can look at. Most companies have what you call bonuses, and that's to make sure that the employees feel appreciated for the job well done. But where it comes to companies that are unable to give bonuses, taking an opportunity in building the skills of the employees, that could also be a way of improving the psychosocial working environment. Because once an employer sees that somebody who works for them has the skill to move forward, the employee can sense that and thus can even give more. And when one does give more in the workplace, And I think the relationship between the employer and the employees increases to the point that they play off each other as to how to improve the working place environment and at the same time improve business. So trusting the employees sometimes could be the way. I can give an example as to when we think about computers nowadays. The computers that we have at the current moment, they did not have the same quality of speed as they did 10 to 15 years ago. Yes, yet the employer, IBM, trusted the employees enough to in what they were doing and in the skills of the employees that they just pushed it forward. And today we have computers that are able to actually give it a camera and at the same time have this seminar and webinar. So I think there's a greater chance of improving the working environment if we also trust the employees and the skills that they have.
An addition comment to this discussion is that OSH in Kenya has still a long way to go. As for taking care of psychosocial care of the workers, I can tell you we are way behind. We need to incorporate OSH in primary health care. This is actually one of the reason we chose to have this webinar on psychosocial work environment, so that the more people know about psychosocial work environment, the more people talk about it, the more the employers know about it, the more the employees know about it and what it's all about, then the chances of having it put in place and being practiced will increase. But when we talk of safety, we talk about falling from heights, we talk about exposure to chemicals, we talked about working with heavy machinery. But the emotional part, the relationship part between the worker and the employer, and the worker and the other worker, this is not something we talk about. So the more we put effort in talking about this, the more this will come home and the more people will understand the importance of this. Thank you, Jalab, for this comment. There's another question here. Racism is an issue that leaves employees demoralized. How best can one tackle this in a workplace with different nationalities?
As I have mentioned, when we look at risk assessment, we look at gender, and we looked at religion, and racism can also be added to that, because each and every employee themselves are the only ones who can tell about what kind of racist comments that they feel themselves. Somebody who feels that they've been exposed to racism, they're the only ones who can actually name it, and they're the only ones who can actually put words that that are relevant for them to it. So I would add it definitely, yes, to the risk assessments, because we do not know which position or which person can experience it. We can, if it's a continuous, a systematic exposure to racism, then the risk factor is higher. For that reason, the employee has to then follow through in informing this to the employer, and the employer is then has to put into place what kind of routines can we maybe place to ensure that the staff do not get exposed to such comments. Maybe in some cases, it might be the fact that you put up a sign saying that this is a non-racial working environment, because sometimes it's easy to generalize just based on one experience. So we are humans and we have the tendency to say, just because this person comes from a certain place or a certain country, they're all like that. Look at the individual and not who or what the person is.
The issue of racism at workplace and beyond workplaces in other places where people experience racism. Most of the time, racism is a result of ignorance. So people have to shed off this ignorance of the other people, those people, we and them. This is an issue, and it can be a challenge where you work in a place with people from different nationalities. But in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, people who show tendencies of racism to others, or racistic activities towards others, they are just people behaving badly, and they just have to they just have to change, to accept that we are human beings, and we can be different, and it's our difference, which brings the beauty of working together. The difference, because my experience from coming from this country, or somebody's experience coming from another country or from another background, all these experiences, when we put together, it's when we improve our well-being. So any other questions?
I could not agree with you with there more. And like I'd also mentioned, is the fact that more often than not, because of one bad experience, we tend to generalize. So one person from another country can have done something wrong to me, and yet when I speak about that country, I end up generalizing so much, so that it becomes a part of grouping that country as a bad country, as a country that is weak, as a country that does not perform properly, as a country that is corrupt, as a country that this, or even the people are like that because they come from that country. And more often than not, it is ignorance. At the same time, it also is based on some of the words that we use in our everyday life. So we have to maybe take a look at how we say things. We have to take a look at how we interact with other cultures. Take a look at ourselves. How can I also back up my coworker if, because she comes from another country, she is then exposed to more racism than I am?
Please write your questions in the chat, or if you'd rather speak about it, you can unmute yourself and present your questions, because I don't see any more questions in the chat. But if you could briefly address one thing, Caroline, just briefly, how should we deal with the macho culture we have in our workplaces in African setting? We have this macho culture. You have you are working in a construction site, so putting some cream on your skin to prevent exposure to allergens is for weak people. Women put on cream, men don't. So men are tough. You have to have rough skin and not a smooth skin as for the ladies. How can we deal with that when we talk about psychosocial work environment?
That's an interesting question. Well, I guess when it comes to the macho environment, and because I guess it also comes from one's co-workers and how they react to that. Again, it's basically changing the way we think and the way we talk about such things. So maybe it could also be the fact that the employer has to put that into the risk assessment. Do comments such as that, you are a man, you should tolerate this, do they affect how the employee works? Yes. Okay. How often does that one get these comments sent to their face? once or twice a day, 3 times a week, once a month, how does it affect them psychosocially? How does that affect his work? And that's how we should look at it, because if we look at it that way, okay, it affects his work because he ends up not using his cream because he's been taunted by his colleagues or by somebody else who he works with. Maybe that's what we have to take up in the meetings before even we start the project, to say it's important that we use those kind of creams. It's important because we need those hands for the next 20 years, for the next 50 years. Otherwise, if we don't use it, then I will not have hands good enough to actually eat my food with. So associating it with something that is tangible is actually maybe one of the ways to look at it. And also being very, taking part very early on in adding it to the risk assessment and presenting it to the employees. And at the same time discussing it with the employees. Why is it that we talk about it that way? Why is it then we see it as a weakness rather than a strength?
Okay, thank you for a nice, good, clear, precise answer. I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I would like to thank all those who sent the questions and for your participants. Thank you very much, Caroline, for this interesting and something which I personally think we need it very much in Kenya and in many other places. So I don't have anything else to add. Just want to tell you that the next webinar will be on 27th, and our speaker will be Mr. Bayo Awosanya. He's here with us. He works with Shell UK. He's an industrial hygienist, and he will talk about some issues that you can use in OSH management decision making. So that will also be a very interesting presentation. We'll put up the information on our webpage soon, but the date you can already now set. The date will be on 27th, Monday, 27th, at the same time. So if there's nothing else from anybody, I will hand it back to Mr. Imran. Are you there?
I am very much here. So I think the issue of racism is one of those hot topics in the moment. I think unless you've been living under a cave for the past few months, I'm sure you're aware that people are taking a stand all over the world. Celebrities, footballers, actors, and so on. They are taking a stand against racism. I think it's something it's something to be proud of, to see people stand up like that collectively. And I think a topic like that, we can maybe as the OSH Pro team, maybe we can decide to hold another webinar to focus on that specifically. I think we can have a discussion over that.
We'll think about it.
Yeah, you will think about it, yeah. So I don't have anything else to add, except to say thanks to Caroline. Thank you for taking the time.
And keep safe.
Yes, you too. You too. Thank you for taking time out of your day to present to us. I think it was very refreshing to see you dissect our OSH Workplace Act. I think maybe 90% of Kenyans don't know about it, but as OSH Pro, we're working towards fixing that. So it was really nice to see you touch on that. So I have nothing else to say except thanks to everyone who also joined, and I hope to see you during the next meeting. Okay, good night.
Good night, thank you, and keep safe.
Okay, bye-bye.
Goodbye, thank you.